And welcome to a Tuesday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys along for the ride. I think we had a pretty good day yesterday. Went 2-1 with Mike Jones, picking baseball. He really gets into it. All kinds of different rationale behind the selections that he made. He liked Milwaukee yesterday, the Milwaukee Brewers, to continue their hot streak. And they did just that, annihilating Seattle 6-0. A breeze to the wire on that one. Never in doubt. And he also went with the Padres, getting a little bit of a price against the surprisingly decent Miami Marlins, who are 6 games under 500 going into that ball game. Most people thought they would have been buried by now. And they've managed to acquit themselves very well for a team that we had labeled a bunch of, and we don't mean this in any kind of disparaging way whatsoever, but essentially you had a bunch of bag ladies and general manager there that we thought was maybe only the bat boy when he was with the Tampa Bay Rays, this guy Peter Bendix. Maybe we need to reconsider our opinion on both of those things. Marlins have been pretty surprising. They hang tough against the Padres yesterday. Padres, of course, trying to track down the Dodgers, who've been ice cold. And the Padres make two second-inning runs stand up. Their bullpen outstanding in a ball game last night. Went 4 2/3 of two-hit baseball. The Marlins unable to raise a gallop. The Stowers continues to really stamp himself as a real find for this team. Last year, I talked to some people inside the organization weren't overwhelmingly impressed with him. And this year, he's been nothing but lights out, and especially in the power category. Of course, you saw him in the All-Star game, and he has like 22 homers now and is definitely a threat. He accounted for the only run with a home run in the ball game for the Marlins last night. But Mike Jones comes out on top, and then he took it on the chin a little bit. Our one loss of the 3 ball games that were selected on the program yesterday, the Mets prevailing over the Los Angeles Angels. That game was 5-5, I believe, going to the bottom of the 8th inning. And the Mets come up with a couple of runs. The Angels were unable to answer back. Top of the night. So 2-1 yesterday, not too bad. Today we got into, and maybe it's time that we did a little, and I'm not sure what you can decipher anymore. I know we took a lot of flack here when we originated the show right around, coincidentally, with the football season getting underway, the preseason. And I made the statement here on the program that if you're betting preseason football, and betting the side especially, you really need to be Baker acted and or consider turning yourself in as being criminally insane. And the comments were less than flattering. The bettors out there, you guys that have been watching, hammered me and said, well, what does this guy know? The unders are a cinch, which I probably should have taken into account. But and I would be inclined to believe that that will be the case once again this year, because they don't give a flying fuck about what goes on in the preseason anymore. I was just recounting on another program that we do on Bleacher Brothers that, and you can catch it on South Florida Live. We do an hour show every day from 8 to 9 Eastern time. We zero in a lot on what goes on locally here in South Florida, but we talk about virtually anything that happens. And I was giving a little chronicle of my experiences in NFL training camps, where I started out as a newspaper reporter in Los Angeles. I remember being underwhelmed by the training facility which the Rams employed. Ray Malavasi was the coach at the time. They had just made Bob Brudzinski their number 1 pick in that year's draft. And there wasn't a whole lot to talk about, although they practiced their asses off back in that day. I finally, a year later, moved to Miami and started covering the Miami Dolphins, and I could hear the NFL Films music in my head as I was trying to find the facility. Don Shula, the Miami Dolphins. I mean, you can almost hear the narration by John Facenda of the 1972 season. Now, this was circa 1981. I had gotten a job at a local radio station here in Miami, WINZ 940 on a radio dial, where oddly I began here and then years later finished up like a 14-year run in morning drive in Miami. And so that station always was of some significance to me. And they send me out to immediately the news editor says, hey, go out to Dolphins training camp and get some sound bites for today, and you'll have them for your afternoon sportscast. I was doing like 3-minute sportscasts every half hour on an all news station. And so the sound bites were good to have because it broke up the whole monotony of the thing. And of course, everybody wanted to hear about the Miami Dolphins with Don Shula. This was prior to Marino being on the ball club. Of course, he was drafted in 1983. And I'll never forget, I couldn't find a facility. This predated GPS devices. The station wasn't actually that far away from where the Dolphins were practicing at a place called St. Thomas University. And St. Thomas University didn't offer much in the way of a practice facility. In fact, I couldn't help but think of the line from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when I drove in there. And that was, what a dump. This is where the formerly undefeated two-time world champion Miami Dolphins are playing with the vaunted Hall of Fame coach Don Shula at the helm. You got to be kidding me. At that time, they used to have 3-a-days, and they were out there working. And then on top of that, at that period of time, I believe they were still playing not 1, not 2, not 3. Sound like LeBron James here, but 6 preseason games. 6. And we were trying to attach meaning to all of it, and the truth was there was nothing there. And I believe it's even more so the case now. They're playing 3 preseason games. If you guys are betting on the side in these games, you have no idea what the agenda of the team is. The fact that the under totals are going to, I would imagine the bookies, they always find a way to adjust, right? Is that horizontal or vertical I got to hit? They always find a way to adjust. And I would think the totals will be extremely low this year that are offered on preseason football because the bookies did get buried last year by the under players because nobody's playing, nobody's practicing. We would go out and do radio shows from the Dolphins facility, which was a big upgrade. In fact, they've upgraded it twice since those days at St. Thomas, where you used to drive into the entrance and there was a sinkhole that had yet to be repaired for like years. And you literally, your car would be 3 feet underground as you were trying to pull in there. It was almost like they pulled a trap door on you. And since that time, they had a relatively spectacular facility somewhere on the other side of town. And then finally, they moved near their stadium, their Hard Rock Stadium, but with an even more ridiculously palatial practice facility. The point being, it doesn't seem like they really look to do much in the preseason. The starters don't play a whole lot. I don't know how much you're going to see of Tua Tagovailoa or any of the starting quarterbacks around the league. I'm not sure if it even applies to rookies like Cam Ward, who obviously is going to be the starter in Tennessee. If that wasn't apparent, Will Levis out for the season now. So you're going to see the former Miami quarterback, Cam Ward, in there, the number 1 overall pick. And don't know that he's surrounded by the best of talent there in Tennessee. Seems like they're probably a long way away. So we will see how he fares. The guy has a rocket for an arm, and that transition, of course, is a very difficult one when you're going from playing college football in the ACC to now starting in the NFL with a team that's essentially inferior to virtually everybody else that you're going to play. But not much to decipher from the training camp, so we'll try and chronicle a little bit of what's happening. Of course, Jerry Jones popped off his mouth and already has pissed off his best player on the team, Micah Parsons, by implying that I can't give you all this money because you might get hit by a car tomorrow. Okay, Jerry. Doesn't he do that every year? I mean, Jerry's always sitting out there pontificating. He drove Jimmy Johnson out of there, and you can see why. Insufferable. The way that he has seized control of the spotlight of that team. He's the go-to guy no matter what. Dak Prescott could be naked on the field, and they'd still run to Jerry to see what he thought about it before they asked Dak about whether or not he'd lost his mind. And every year, it doesn't seem like there's some guy that's in a position to renegotiate or is holding out a little bit. And Jerry condemns the whole concept, saying, well, you know what, we can't just give money away. And then he gives them like 5 times what the going rate is for that type of player. So I'd imagine they get that resolved. But Jerry already making some noise out there at Thousand Oaks with the Dallas Cowboys saying, well, I don't know if I can give this money to this guy. It's like, you better, Jerry. You know you're going to cough it up. So why even pretend that something else is happening? I was looking at this, though, and we were talking today about the AFC East over-under totals for the season. And the professor's going to get into some of this on Friday's show with college and I guess pro football as well. AFC East, it's the Bills and everybody else, or so it appears to be. And according to the odds makers, they see it the very same way that you do. Bills over-under is 11 and a hook. Did the Bills go 12-5 this year? They would need to go 12-5 to appease the over players. It seems like, I mean, think about it. Look at the division they're in. Who's really good? The Jets are projected at 5.5. The Jets over/under total 5.5. Mike Jones, who we had on the show yesterday, joins us every Monday and Thursday. He seems to think they're going to eclipse that. I'm not so sure that they do. If they do, it'll be because they beat on a couple of patsy teams that are also in the division. And you would imagine maybe can they accomplish a split in their two games with the Finns and the Patriots? Possibly. I think Justin Fields has been a little bit of a disappointment. Showed some promise with Chicago, and then ended up last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Looks like he's going to be the starter. Russell Wilson becomes part of the picture, replaces him as soon as he was healthy enough to do so. And so you saw where Mike Tomlin didn't have as much faith in Justin Fields as you might imagine that he did when he started the season. He brings in Wilson. Wilson does well for a while and then reverts back to being a guy that we saw looking like an aging shell of his former self, not even a reasonable facsimile with the Denver Broncos when Sean Payton just ran him out of town and said, you know what, we paid the wrong guy again. It was Matt Flynn, too. As you saw the Seattle, actually dump Matt Flynn for Russell Wilson. That was a ball move. And then they end up seeing this guy just fall apart and kind of fell apart the tail end. I don't know it was all Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh last year, but if you couldn't beat out Russell Wilson at the end of the season and you were Justin Fields, I don't know that he's going to guide the Jets to any great heights this year. But Mike's inclined to think the Jets do better than 5.5. If they do, it's probably because they sweep either the Patriots or the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins are projected at 8.5, and the over players are getting plus 165. So here's this team that's gone through various approaches over the last 5-6 years. First, it was tanking. It was embarrassing. They were going to get all this draft capital. They were going to get a bunch of young guys, and they were going to try and really sort of regrow from their bottom up and have a team that was going to come together in 3 or 4 years and just be a dynasty. They scrapped that plan. They scrubbed that right away and started signing every free agent, making every big trade that they could. They were doling out all kinds of capital. They did get Tyreek Hill, which is a nice pairing for Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Waddle turned out to be a promising draft pick. Had compromised his play a little bit last year because of injuries, but nonetheless, when he's on, very dynamic receiver. They got rid of Jonnu Smith, who was a sensational find for him. They bring in Darren Waller, who had retired because he lost his desire to play football. Never necessarily a good sign. I don't know to what level he's gotten it back. But they were 8-9 last year, and the owner, after the season was over, comes in and goes, hey, you know what? That was great. Let's run it back. And you're thinking, what a schmuck this guy. Stephen Ross is a guy that you would want to work for. I wish he would buy one of these streaming services, and you could go to work for him because no matter how much of a failure you were, he's always got faith in you. It would be great to exist and do. You're driving to your job right now or whatever. You're thinking about, geez, the manager is always a miserable son of a bitch. Not the case if you're playing for Stephen Ross because he just gives you the cash, whatever it is, even when it's unnecessary. And then 8-9 is perfectly satisfactory to him at the end of the season. He comes into the locker room all excited and says, that was great, guys. Let's run it back. Is that an omen for a culture? Mike McDaniel's been a little bit of a mystery as a head coach with this team. Can the Finns win 9 games this year? Certainly not out of the question. The one reason to be optimistic about them might be because they will have Hill was not 100% last year after the cops threw him to the cement before the opening game because they didn't recognize that, hey, I got a car full of large black men, and they all look like athletes. Maybe there are players on the team that were trying to get into the player parking lot. They end up, because Hill wouldn't roll his windows down, some over-ambitious cop throws him to the ground, handcuffs him, and I believe that's where he sustained a wrist injury that plagued him throughout the whole season. At least it seems that way, and I don't know that was coincidental because he wasn't quite the same guy. He never used to drop passes, and he was afflicted with Manos de Piedro, a little bit of the hands of stone last year. So that's an awkward number. If you're playing the under, though, you have to lay 2-1. So the odds makers are telling you they think the Dolphins are at best going to be an 8-9 team. And that may be where they end up again, but an oddball number. The Pats, Mike Vrabel is considered the second coming of Vince Lombardi. They showed signs of life last year. They came on a little bit at the end of the season. That was under Gerard Mayo, who they quickly distanced themselves from. Can the Patriots be a little bit of a surprise and accomplish an over? They're also at 8.5 in that AFC East. So, Bills, you're thinking probably do Are they a 12-5 team? Maybe so. It's a lot of wins. I mean, you must make no mistakes there. Can't have any injuries to key players, and certainly if Josh Allen goes down, they go from being a 12-5 team to 5-12. Dolphins right there on the bubble. That is one of the toughest numbers to play into I've seen. The fact that the bookies have made it minus 200. You have to lay 2-1 if you're taking the under on that is a bit of an indicator. You're getting a very generous plus 165 if you think this team is going to be any good. Defensively, they have all kinds of problems, though. I invested a lot of money in guys that haven't been able to line up and play. They also don't have a cornerback to start the season. They don't have any bona fide starting cornerbacks on the roster on defense. So that could be a big burn job now with the emphasis on the passing game and the fact that you really have nobody that can cover anybody. Holy J.B. Brown, what are we talking about here? So that's a dicey number. If Rabel is all that, everybody, I mean, literally, you would think this guy was George Allen, Lombardi, and any great coach that you could mention, all rolled up into one. He did well in Tennessee. Does he have enough there with the Patriots to go over 8.5? Inclination would be to think not, but if the Dolphins falter, then that certainly opens the door for the Pats to be a viable bet. And the Jets at 5 and a hook. That's a tough number also. So not a lot of optimism floating around the AFC East, except for the Buffalo Bills, who appear to be clearly superior to the rest of the three teams in that field. But we'll get into that and try and figure out who we can tab and make some money with as the season gets a little bit closer. I was also looking at, and this is down the road, and we had a big boxing weekend. Is Usyk, maybe? I mean, should he be mentioned among great heavyweights? Alexander Usyk, the Ukrainian, just keeps knocking guys out. He knocked out Daniel Dubois over the weekend. Dubois had shown some promise. He has beaten virtually everybody that is out there, including Tyson Fury, who supposedly is going to fight him again. Usyk, very impressive. And you did have the Pacquiao fight. People are still debating the result of that one. Pacquiao thought he got robbed. I don't think it was a Timothy Bradley decision or that Jeff Horn thing that happened in Australia. But Manny Pacquiao has benefited many times from the pencil as well. But in this case, it seems like it's a mixed bag, almost divided right down the middle, which makes you think that maybe the draw was a justified call on that one. I don't know what the odds were on that. You would have to think that Pacquiao was an underdog, but with his popularity, people were going to be sending money in on him. And I'm not sure if that swung the odds towards fight time. But it was interesting, and maybe it stimulated some more interest in the game, Manny's comeback. But the big fight that's coming up, of course, is down the road in September. And you have Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. People have been talking about this for some time. General consensus would be that Canelo Alvarez just has too much of an edge. Teddy Atlas, who we've spoken with about this, says, and seems like a theory that would hold up, that you always want to bet on the bigger guy. And that is reflected in the odds right now as you have Canelo at minus 175 there or thereabouts. I'll lay 175 to win 100 on Canelo. Crawford, you're getting plus 145, somewhere in that neighborhood of 3-2 on Terence Crawford. Can Crawford outbox and outslick and outpunch Canelo Alvarez? I think the one thing that you can count on there is that this does appear destined to go the distance, doesn't it? Over under 10.5 rounds of a 12-round fight. So you don't even have to go the distance. You still could get a knockout or some kind of stoppage. But the over-under is minus 390, the under. Or the over is minus 390. You have to pay $390 to win 100 if you think it's going to go 10.5 rounds or more. I would think that that's a veritable cinch. I mean, barring some fluke accident, a headbutt that causes a cut that ends up in a stoppage, some kind of a form of disqualification for low blows or something. I don't think either guy is really in that category. I mean, it's not like we're watching Andrew Galata, where we're showing combinations to the balls. And by design, I don't think you're going to see some kind of crazy Victor Ortiz thing. So both of these guys, real solid pros. You can't say that either Crawford or Canelo that represent themselves well as a professional. Canelo with the juice. Is he going to get knocked out? Probably not. Crawford, I think, is crafty enough to stay in there. Canelo's more of a body puncher than he is a guy that goes to the head. I don't think he's going to knock Crawford out with a body punch. So that would appear to be a way to make money, although I'm not interested really in laying 390 to win 100 on that particular proposition. Where you could make some money is if you think either guy's going to win by knockout, which I just made a case for the fact that that's not happening. You still could win the over-under if you took the over if the knockout came in the 11th or 12th round. That's entirely possible, isn't it? So Canelo 3-1 to win by knockout. Excuse me. And Crawford 8-1. Can Crawford, does he have enough power to knock out Canelo? I would think not. If Bivol couldn't knock out Canelo Alvarez, I can't. And Bivol is a legitimate light heavyweight with a big punch. If he couldn't knock him out, and he was really outclassing Canelo throughout most of that fight, throwing and landing more blows, I don't think Canelo's getting knocked out. So you're one play there, and I believe Canelo will prevail. So you're laying a lot of cash there if you get into that fight. But we'll see if the odds change. Of course, it's still a couple of months away. So we'll see how the betting goes on that thing. But it's hard to imagine, Terence. A lot of people like Crawford in this fight. I don't, only because of that bigger man theory. And I think Canelo's kind of been coasting. His team has been digging up opponents from German graveyards for the last 5 years or so, it seems. He did freeze against Money Mayweather when he was still kind of up and coming a little bit and in a position to show that he belonged in this category of pound-for-pound best. Distinguishes himself usually pretty well, but competition level is the same knock that's been on Terence Crawford outside of Errol Spence, who's he fought. And so I'm thinking Canelo wins this thing. I don't know if I'd lay 175 on it, but if you did want to have some action on that right now, that would be my thought. Canelo by decision and the over 10.5 rounds. So it looks like a solid lock if you're looking at that fight. All right, good luck, everybody, on all your baseball bets. Scotty M's going to join us tomorrow. He makes his return to the program. On Thursday, we'll feature Mike Jones again, who, as we said, was gracious enough to give us 2 out of 3 winners on the baseball card last night. And Friday, we'll have the professor and his big board and some futures on college football, where he really had a rough year last year by his standards. So I'm thinking he's going to bounce back really strongly. I've seen this guy just be dynamite all college football season long. And we'll have some futures for the college football season, over-unders and prop bets, and also for the NFL. So that's still to come this week. You guys have a great one. Good luck with all your plays. And we'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.